with our third session. So to kick things off, last year we had a presentation on testing suite with a demo. We will have another presentation showing us some PMC testing and some updates that we've been making with the CAPE-OPEN test suite. So Malcolm, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carl. The agenda actually says I've got two presentations. I no longer have two presentations. It's all in one. So you've got the pleasure of my company for the next hour, unfortunately. So what am I going to cover? I'm going to look at the PMC test suite, the PME test suite, the certification process, basic outline. So under the PMC test suite, I'm going to look at what we've done since last year, the process that we followed for specifying the tests, a demo of the latest beta, talk about what's not in that beta, and our plans for 2024-25. On the PME test suite, again, what we've done since last year and our plans for the rest of this year and next year. Then I want to revisit certification, which is not something we've actually talked about for a couple of years now. It was in the original presentations, but we've not talked about it. So I actually want to talk about how certification work, what is compliance, how much effort will be required to actually certify a PMC or a PME, and again, our plans for 2024 and 25. And I'll just finish off with how to contribute to the ongoing programme. And I'm hoping to leave some time for question and discussion at the end. So put some nice blank slides in here to slow me up, so I just don't keep gabbling for the next hour. Okay, so what have we done since last year? The PMC test suite as a command line interface. The commands on it were somewhat inconsistent. They didn't look right, so we've actually improved those. So they're more consistent, more intuitive. We've improved the user interface, so it uses clearer terminology and it's more intuitive, and you'll see both of those in the demo. I would emphasize that we have a command line interface, so it can be automated. We have a user interface, so you can set up the initial configuration files and you can do ad hoc testing. So we have been implementing tests for common interfaces and property package. We now have 98 tests covering property package and identification. It's a lot more than we had last year when I think we were in the 20s. So we have a lot more tests. There are still some more to be implemented, which I'll come back to. But the current beta, I think I released it Thursday morning to our beta testers. Just in time. I do like just in time. But it is fully functional and will give meaningful results, even though it's not finished. We don't have all the tests. What's there will generate meaningful results. So it is useful. So the beta testers will be able to use it on their actual software. And hopefully, as in the past, we may find some further issues with both software or test suite. We've actually improved the reporting of the summary of tests. Before it just told you how many tests have been done and how many had failed. Now it tells you total number of tests that have been attempted, which is tests executed. Tests skipped, which is skipped by the user. If you filter and you don't do the full 98 tests currently, you get the number of tests you've actually chosen not to do. Not executed, and I must say, the final bullet down here as I'm going through, we are going to improve this wording, because when we started looking at it last week, we suddenly thought this wording isn't very good. Hence the definitions. Not executed tests are tests that can't be completed because of a failure in another test. So that you've run two tests, the first one fails, you can't run the second one fully because the first one has failed. And that's what a not executed test is. Failed tests, I think, is self-explanatory. They're tests that have specifically failed. So they are a problem that needs to be fixed. We also report the total number of info, warning and error messages, and I'll come back to the purpose of words later. So that's what we've done since this. Oh, no, it does continue. Thought it did. Test specification documents are, Asper, I think they're hundreds of pages long now in total, aren't they? I believe there is a lot of test specification documents. So you're reading your test results and you get test has failed. It's got a description of the test. How do you go and find the full test results? So what we've done is we've given every test a unique UUID, which gets reported in the test log. So you can just search the documents to find the actual test. So we're not relying on any string description of a test or a number of a test. We've got a unique UUID in there, which will never change. The report output file is a JSON, and we have now published the schema. So on the website, which means you can use it in an automated environment. You can read the log file, the report file, and use the results from it in an automated testing environment. Or if your company or whoever you're working with wants the report in a different format, you can process the JSON file using the schema and turn it into any format you like. We have addressed, I think it's exactly 68 tickets in the last year. Now they cover all the improvements we've made above, other minor usability improvements and defects we've already identified in both the test engine and test implementation. So we've done a lot of work in the last year. But you might be saying, how many years have we been at this now? I think it's 3. Why have we not got any further than we've got? And this is one of the major reasons, the process for specifying the tests. So we'll take property package. The relevant SIG, the thermo SIG, has defined a list of tests that they want. And that covers the purpose of the test and how it should be performed. And the experience is that that is a complex iterative process. And it takes multiple SIG meetings. And that's for the thermo SIG, which has a meeting once a week. Some of the other SIGs only meet once a month, so that's going to slow the process up, obviously. So that iterative process takes a lot of time just to define what the test should look like in the first place. The thermo SIG experience, again, as has already been said, shows up issues with the actual textual documentation. So you have to write new E&Cs. Both bullets covered in one there. So that once the SIG has come up with the list of tests, the purpose of it and how it should be performed, it then gets passed to the CO-Lan software development resource, who turn it into a full specification, detailed specification following the standard format. That then has to be reviewed internally, and it gets implemented in the test suite. And that whole section is another iterative process, because reviews internally, you have to make changes to both the test specification and the implementation. And sometimes it has to go back to the SIG as well. So you're then waiting for a response from the SIG. So the whole process is slow. And I think that's the major reason we're still only at 96 tests now. It's because that's that iterative process that we have to follow. But it's incredibly valuable. Even if we threw the test suite away now, because we've got those E&Cs updated, we've made a major improvement in the textual specifications for the interfaces we've done so far. And we will get the test suite out afterwards. Sergey has already referred to this one, but the tests implemented in the test suite are based on updated E&Cs. The test suite can't therefore be released as a production version until the E&Cs have been RFC'd and approved. Because otherwise we're releasing a production version of the test suite, which is for testing things that the developers know nothing about, because they're in unpublished E&Cs. And we can't hardly expect them to meet those when they haven't been RFC'd, approved, and so on. So if things may fail when you use a beta because of a change in an E&C. And the developers need to change their code to meet the E&C if they have put a different interpretation on what was in the original textual specification. But what we can do, we have a beta version. We can supply the beta version of the test suite along with the E&C when it goes out for RFC, so that it can be used to aid understanding of why the E&C says what it says. Okay, here we go. The risky bit. Let's come out. Okay, the first thing, the installation of the PMC test suite does not change the path on a Windows machine. To actually get that to change, you execute the CAPE-OPEN test suite command prompt from the start menu. And that adds it to the path for you, for this instance of the command prompt. If I pull that right down, make sure it's big as possible. There we go. And as you can see, I've got my nice little book of words here. So, help. So this is where we've changed the command line interface and the switches on it so that it's all more consistent. So that is the basic, as long as you know to use the start menu and the command prompt option on there to start this window. Thereafter, there will be a user guide, but this is basically the help for the whole system. It's all that exists at this moment in time. So we can find out the version that I'm running. Is that actually visible from the back, or is it too small? Was that a shake of the head saying you can't read it?
I can't read it because it's too low.
Okay, it's not. I can probably start. I was looking at the earlier presentations from my laptop at the back, and I could actually read it better on the laptop than I could read it on the screen. Okay, I'll talk through what it's showing us then. So the command line interface is running version 0.2.2.0, and the CAPE-OPEN test suite is the test engine is the same version, which is good because that's the most recent version. We have, within the test suite, we have libraries of tests, which we've got them for property package best practice, and unit operation. So the property package best practice is where we will put things that are not required for compliance, for certification, but are useful tests to be run. The property package library is specifically for compliance tests. And if I then look to see the tests within the property package library, no, that's incorrect. Look at the categories, Jasper. What's the next level down called? Categories, test category. I've now listed the test categories available within property package, and these are implemented based on the interfaces. So we've got iCAPE identification, thermocompounds, equilibrium routine, material context, thermophases, thermoproperty routines, and thermal universal constants. And then to actually see the tests themselves, right one. Right, I'm just reading my own notes and trying to work out. No, excellent. We move on. So I can do the same for the other two libraries. Now, this is where we switch from the command line to the Windows interface. So I'm creating a new configuration file called config.txt. And that will pop our rejigged user interface. So I'll give it a name. CAPE-OPEN version is 1.2. It's the only version we currently support. So first of all, we select the test library. So we select the property package. We then select the component under test. And the demo I gave last year, this was about 2 or 3 different selection boxes in this guide. Now we just click the select button, which makes life a lot easier because everything to do with selecting the component comes up in one place. I am going to select T, and I'll select the alkanes package. Job done. Now I could actually open T by clicking on the configure button, but I'm not going to. So here again, we have the test categories listed within that test library, and those that need parameters defined, we can define the conditions here by configuring the test category. And iCAPE thermo compounds requires a temperature and a pressure. I'm not going to change them, but we can edit the values here. So now, property routine and equilibrium routine also need data parameters, but at this moment in time, if I do a bigger test category, it tells me it doesn't need it. That's because we haven't implemented the user interface yet. So I've now told the system that I'm going to test T on its alkanes property package. But let me rephrase that. I'm going to test the alkanes property package from T. I'm not testing T at all. I'm testing its alkanes property package on all the tests in these test categories. If I click OK, it will now save that. Should hopefully push that. I can't click. Ow.
Yeah, hopefully there should be.
I put it in the wrong place.
One further up.
One further up again.
Yeah.
Whoa, thank you. Totally the wrong place. There it is. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to run that config file immediately. I'll show you why in a second. So immediately I've run it. It's run all 90. Was it 96 or 98? I've run them. It's run all the tests. And on the screen here, I've got told tested run OK. I've got info messages. Telling me which category each test lives within. And right down the bottom here, I have an error. First of all, I have iCAPE thermo universal constants failed. And then I get an error for the next one, which is iCAPE thermo universal constants, which has an error message in it because it depends on the test that's failed. So this is an example where the second test has an error on it because the first test has failed. So and down here, I've got tests executed 98. I haven't chosen to skip any tests. I have one not executed test, which is the one I've got the error message from. And I've got one failed test. 13 info messages, 0 warnings, and 1 error. And if I now open that config.txt file, this is the JSON. And you can immediately see here, this is the data I showed you for iCAPE thermo compounds, temperatures and pressures. And it has created me a condition for a single flash, which is a TP flash, I believe, at 1 bar and 300 Kelvin. When we implement the user interface for equilibrium routine and property routine, you will be able to define this within the user interface. At the moment, the only way you have of adding extra flashes or extra property parameters for the property calculations is to edit this JSON. The advantage of this JSON is it's machine readable, and you can automate the adding of these in this format. Much easier to automate it is than to edit it yourself. But yeah, we will be providing the user interface. And just to so if I now close that and open my log test results now and search for failed. Can I not type? I can't read them. Oh, helps I change it to down, doesn't it? So there's my failed test. Tells me exactly why it's failed. Now, I will emphasize, often to do this, and Jasper will kill me if I don't say this, is this error has been in T, the installed version of T on my machine for 2 years. Jasper fixed it within hours of me reporting it in the first place. I deliberately have not updated my version of T on here, so I still get the error. So I can show you an error, because otherwise I've got nothing that's got an error in it. So yeah, T has been fixed. So there's the error message. But if I want to find out more information about this, there's the UUID. And if I now open the reader and I do Control-Shift-B, no, it won't do that. Dangers of live demos. Where's it gone?
Is this GUID for the particular individual or the test?
Test. It's a GUID for the test. I'll make that work. So
The one in your recent list now.
let me do this. Okay, so I'm going to change to oh, there it is. So I'm now searching. I've got a copy of all the test specifications as PDFs on this machine. So I'm now going to type in the UUID of the failed test. Yes, I want to allow that. Yep. I don't want a Torak of that. And very quickly, I found the actual section of the correct test document that describes the test that has failed. So I can link the document with the test, or link the test with the document. It's a massive step forward, actually, because otherwise you just have got to go see if you can hunt for the text strings that are in that failed test until you find it.
In case there's some change, will it get a new UUID?
No, the test will stay, the UUID will change, will stay the same. So that it doesn't matter if we change the numbering of it, if we change the name of it, if we change the details, the UUID will now stay the same. Okay, did I cover everything? Oh, one more thing to do. Let me get rid of that. Get rid of that. Use that. And if I run a filtered test. So what I'm doing here is I'm filtering on only the tests in iCAPE thermo compounds, in the category iCAPE thermo compounds. So this time it's only executed 33 tests. I have chosen to skip 65. All I want to show you is how that stats work. So this actually gives you a much better record of how many tests have been conducting, how many you've chosen not to conduct, and this time, because the failed test doesn't exist in that category, I've got no failed tests. End of demo. There it is. Okay, what's not in the beta? So there's 3 tests for property routine still missing. There's 12 tests for equilibrium routines not implemented yet. They're all in the test specification, but they're not implemented yet. There is no user interface for the configuration of test conditions for property routine and equilibrium routine. As I've already said, it's easy to automate the addition of extra tests, but it's not easy to do on an ad hoc basis by an end user. And I'll come back to this point later, but the specification for equilibrium routine requires a nested loop. We haven't done that nested loop yet. It's not in the, but as I've already said, everything in there, and there's the little capture of the JSON for the equilibrium routine conditions.
Common interfaces are all promising.
So on the next slide. We haven't done basis conversion in the test suite provided material object, which is where it needs to be. And there are still 12 open tickets that we need to address, which includes the finalization of the user documentation, which will be very useful for everybody, and a review and rewording of the failure messages to make them more explanatory. Some of them are a bit obscure at the moment. And that action's been on my plate for about 9 months. But as we said, the UUID improvements came out of that. Answering Jasper's point, there are 3 common interfaces that may be used by property package that aren't yet implemented. So that's iCAPE utilities, iCAPE parameters, and iCAPE persistence. iCAPE parameters, we've discovered there is an interesting issue there in that COBIA is based on the unreleased modified version of this interface, and the test suite is built on COBIA. So we're actually testing if we implement it, we'll be testing against an unmodified I shouldn't say same unmodified version, so it says modified. We are testing against an un-RFC'd version of the parameter interface. We will be. So we need to address that and get it RFC'd ASAP, I think.
Interestingly, people have been developing against that.
Yeah, because it's in the just about to be released as production COBIA.
But parameters come in a collection. You're missing iCAPE collection.
Didn't think we needed it for property package.
Parameters come in a collection.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, so to finish off the test suite. So this year, we're planning to complete the property package implementation, except for common interfaces, because M&T still need to define the required tests for those common interfaces, which I think they're hoping to have it done this year, but it won't be ready for us to implement them in the test suite this year. 2025, we will implement those required common interfaces. We will release, it's not on here, we will release the PMC test suite, the property packages, and provide support to the users. We will work on the PMC test suite for unit operations. Question mark, use common source documentation for all new documents. We're busy preempting Carl's presentation tomorrow. That's the plans for the test suite. How am I doing for time, Carl? So PME test suite. This is quite a quick section of the presentation. We, beginning of the year, end of last year, beginning of the year, Loic, Jasper in particular, made some significant updates to the design document, including design of all the required external interfaces. That is the diagram, which I think is the same as I presented last year, maybe improved, which shows the outline of the PME test suite and what components exist with need to exist. So PME under test is this bit over here in green, and we will have to provide a test PMC to plug into it. So if you're testing thermodynamics, you provide a test property package. We provide a test property package. The test controller is the user interface, the graphical user interface for somebody coming at this, setting it up or doing ad hoc testing. And it will do storage of the state and configuration. It will provide the test workflow, because the issue about the PME test is, unlike PMC, where you just exercise it in set order, PME, the user has to do the steps in the PME. Because we can't automate those, because every PME is different. So this test workflow will tell the user what step they next need to do in the PME. And then there will be a feedback and guiding window, which will actually allow the user to say, yes, I've done that. And then the workflow will then say, this is the next step you need to move on to. So that will be the graphical user interface, which will also produce the reports and the log files. We will also provide a command line controller, which will interface to the test controller, so that if you want to automate it, you go via the command line controller. So if you want to automate your testing and you don't want user interaction at all, you can do it via the command line controller. So that the agent, which will either be the end user or the automation framework, will do the PME specific interaction with the PME. What we're not doing is using iCAPE utilities edit on the PME, because we can't guarantee that exists. It's probably right around, yes, but some PMEs don't provide it. So
I think that particular remark is in the drawing, because the initial design was actually to control the test via the window that pops up if you edit the PMC, which we have now moved to an application outside.
All interactions don't go directly to the edit utility on the PME, they go via the test controller. So the test controller knows exactly what's going on anything. So that's the basic structure. So I've covered that. Okay. Major design decisions. Handling of multiple PMC instances, which requires COBIA phase 3. So we won't be able to release this until COBIA phase 3 is released, but that everything has been done in the current beta and it's being released pretty soon. So that has all been done. And the controller is a windowing application, but we want it to be platform independent. So we had quite a discussion about what windowing technology to use for the controller. Kyle did a large chunk of work on this, and it will be written in C++, but it will use native Windows on MS Windows, and it will use GTK on Unix, Linux, Mac OS. So you will have two flavors of the user interface, one that works on Windows and one that works on Unix, Linux, and Mac OS. So there is no single windowing technology you can use on both platforms that makes sense. I was looking at Oliver looking at.
Qt. What is it?
What about Qt?
Its licensing terms are not suitable for us.
We looked at licensing, we looked at cost, we looked at all sorts of things, and we came to the conclusion the only sensible answer was two different technologies on the two different platforms.
Okay.
So we are planning to produce the so-called ultra minimal POC, proof of concept of the PME test suite. It will do unit PM. It will test the interface for unit PMCs with no thermo only. So it will test the interface from a PME to a unit PMC, where the unit PMC has no thermo. So it's really simple. Just because this is a proof of concept, this is not a realistic test. But we want to show that the linking of the test controller from online interface, a test PMC, all works in practice. So we're keeping it as simple as possible. So the required steps: create the IDL and stub code, create the test unit PMC framework, and create the PME test suite control framework. We're not even going to do the command line interface for this POC. So the plans for test suite, PME test suite 2024, we will complete that ultra minimal POC, fingers crossed, and we will share with selected reviewers for feedback. 2025, further development of the POC and a first release version, question mark, depends on time. because the PMC test suite must take priority. And supporting the use of the PMC test suite for property packages and developing it for unit operations must take priority. The PME will follow on if we have time. Okay, that's the PME test suite. 2 out of 3 major topics covered. I think we're still doing okay at the time. Certification. The proposal is unchanged since the annual meeting from 2022, and I don't know whether you can read that at all, but up here we have the so-called Chief Certification Officer, we have software developers, we have the certification process, test suite and website here in the middle, interoperability SIG, which is myself and Kyle, and the other SIGs. And effectively, I, as the interoperability SIG leader, am acting as an interim certification officer at this moment in time. So the box at the top there, I can even find my mouse there, and the box in the bottom left-hand corner are both the same. That's me currently. Whether that's a long-term decision or that the same person does both roles, I don't know. One for the management board and myself to discuss. So what will be the process? A developer, a preamble to this, the developer can run the test suite as many times as they like during their development process to find out whether they've got any problems. But when they think they have a released version of their software, they run the test suite on PMC or PME, depending on what they've just been working on. They send the output file to the certification officer, who then reviews the output file. And at this point, this is not an automated process, and I'm not sure it can be made an automated process. And there will be an iterative conversation, because the certification officer will read that log file, they'll see an info message, for example, and they'll think, is that relevant or not? Can I certify with that info message there? Not. And then there will be an iterative conversation between the developer and the certification officer. So the certification officers can say, yep, that's okay, I can ignore that one, I can ignore that one, oh yeah, it can be certified. Or no, that's a meaningful message, I need to do something about it. And I'll come back to that in a second. So have you gone through that process? You'll either grant the certificate, the developer has to modify the software to address any issues that have arisen, or the CO-Lan has to update the test specification in the test suite, because what's actually arisen is an issue with those bits of the process. If it's certified, the results are published on the certification website, which I'm assuming will just be a subset of the CO-Lan website. So if there is a challenge to a result or test, which is why we are publishing this test specifications, I think this email address already exists, but the developer sends an email, includes the details of the issue. The certification officer and the interoperability SIG will review and discuss further with the developer, and may need to refer it to the relevant SIG if it's a challenge to the test specification, for example. Possible outcomes: no change is required to the spec tests or the implementation. And it's actually a problem that the developer needs to fix. The test specification needs to be modified, in which case you need SIG approval, you need to update the documentation, you need to update the implementation, and then release a new version of the test suite. Or it's a problem with the test suite itself, in which case we just debug it and give out a new version of the test suite. So 3 possible outcomes if a developer challenges the results or the tests that have been documented and implemented. I'll come back to this handling of test suite messages. Info messages. That log file that I just ran, that set of tests I just ran, the results file has these info messages in it. The first one is an interesting one in that I'm not sure how you handle it. But if I look at the get P dependent property handles undefined list of supported pressure dependent properties is empty. Is that an issue or not? Because are there meant to be some supported pressure dependent properties from this property package? I reviewing the results file don't know. There's nothing that tells me that that property package provides any pressure dependent properties or not. So I've got to go back to the developer and say, should you be providing some of these? Are you providing some of these? In which case the list should not be empty. Therefore, an info message is actually a failure. But if they come back and say, oh, we don't provide pressure dependent properties, I can ignore it if I'm trying to do certification, because it's just saying exactly what the property package I've been told actually doesn't do. So it's not an issue. So info messages is very much a manual iterative process between the certification officer and the developer. They have to be looked at one by one. I think warning messages will be the same, except we don't have any warning messages at the moment. And I'm not sure in what context we'll use them, but none exist at this moment in time.
We classify warning messages as those that will cause best practice test to fail.
Ah, that's why we haven't got any. Okay, we've got no best practice tests. And errors, absolutely, that they are caused by a failure in another test, which you may not have run if you've chosen to filter. But the error in the other test needs to be fixed, or that does not guarantee that the test that was given the error message will now succeed, because it's never been fully executed. It might itself now fail. That makes it clear as mud. Oliver, you're looking that. So yes, an error message in the test means it hasn't been fully executed, which means the problem that caused it needs to be fixed, and then the test rerun. So this whole handling of the test suite messages is an iterative process, and it's going to take time. Now, this is the fun bit of my presentation, because I'm acting as devil's advocate here. I'm being a bit provocative. And I would prefer, the reason I want time for discussion is exactly this point, or these points. And I prefer the members of the thermosig to stay silent for a little while at the beginning of that discussion. And I'm going to look at the test specifications for a property routine and equilibrium routine. The two are a bit different from the CAPE-OPEN implementation in that the property routine, a method exists to get the list of properties supported by the property package. For equilibrium routine, there is no method available to provide a list of the supported flash types. So they are a bit different. And I, in my naivety, when I originally thought about this, thought property routine. Okay, we've got a list of supported properties, we've got a list of unsupported properties. We just need to test a couple of these supported properties to check they work and return value. We need to test a couple of the unsupported properties to ensure a value is not returned, and the fact they're unsupported if the PME asks for that property is handled correctly. You can reorder the compounds when you ask for properties from a property package. And again, in my naivety, I just thought, oh, well, just need to reorder it and check it returns values. And again, subset of compounds. You can provide it a subset of compounds. Does it return a set of values for the subset? That's my naive view, option 1. Option 2, which is what thermosig have specified, you test every property that is supported to check it calculates a value. You test every property that is not supported to ensure a value. And the italics here are the difference to my option 1. So you test every property that's not supported to ensure a value is not returned. You test that the reordered compound list returns values, which are the same as those returned by the original compound order. So you have to do a one-by-one comparison of the property value returned for each compound and check they're the same within a tolerance. Subset of compounds that you check that it gives the same answers within a tolerance as asking for those same for the full compound list with all the missing compounds set to 0. So you're actually checking values. Now, this is a somewhat complex implementation, which is not a problem if that's what we need. And how you define a suitable tolerance. And I've got this little thought in my mind. Do we actually need to go to that complexity?
Well, just to be clear, we're not checking values.
We're not checking the value.
They're correct.
We're checking
whether one value is consistent with another value.
Yes, we are checking two values against each other. We are not checking the actual value. So if I then go on to equilibrium routine, which you've already seen, we've currently got.
It's fine. I'm checking actual values, but only comparison of values. Yeah, but you could also test edge cases where you know what the specific value that must turn up.
That would be a best practice. That would definitely be a best
Actually
practice.
takes only one component.
That would definitely be a best practice if you were checking the actual value.
Yeah.
So come back to that in the discussion. So equilibrium routine, again, my naive view before we started this was that the specification says the results must be written to the correct location. So you must get these results and they must be written here, here, and here. That if the property package doesn't support a flash type, it handles it correctly and says, I don't support it. If the property package the flash in the property package fails to converge, you get a sensible message back. So you've already seen that we have the ability to specify a user set of flashes, temperature, pressure, or whatever. And my view was that all you have to do is define a set of flashes that tests all those requirements. So you have to give one that's going to fail to converge. You have to give one that's not supported by the property package. You have to give a number of them to check that all the parameters the results going to the right locations. And when the certification officer would see that results file, they would say, you've done these flashes. I can see that it handles an unconverged one. I can see it handles a non-supportive flash type, blah, 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 blah. Look, okay, I'm happy. But it's a manual process. What the ThermoSig have specified is that the user still specifies a set of flashes, but the test suite then automatically generates a full set of every possible flash type, where the values of the specifications are generated from each of the user supplied flashes in turn. So that when you run this complete set of flashes of every possible flash type, you can compare the result values against the results from the original flash. And you can make sure it's given within a tolerance the same answers.
No, we're not doing that. We're checking only if the results match the specifications for that particular flash.
It was the specifications.
So if you run a TP flash and you derive overall entropy from there, and then you run a pH flash, we're not checking whether the pH flash matches the TP flash. We only check that the interpretation of the flash classification is correct, so that we're checking that entropy matches the specified entropy.
Okay. Okay, I went a bit too far then in my reading of the document. So, but this list of possible flash types includes flash specifications in reverse order. So you can do PT. If you've not specified a PT flash as a user flash, you need to do a PT flash as well as a TP flash. And if one of the specifications is volume, you need to do it on mass and molar basis. So it's actually quite a long list of flashes in this, and this is executed as an inner loop. For every user supplied flash, you do all of these automatically generated flashes as an inner loop. So not only then are you checking that all the convergence failures are handled correctly, unsupported flash types are handled correctly, etc., but you're also, as Jasper said, and this bullet is slightly wrong, you're checking against the specified values and it's handling that specified value correctly. So there's an awful lot more work there than my naive view of how we were going to test equilibrium routine. And again, how do you specify a suitable tolerance? So my question here is option one, is option two required for compliance? It's absolutely required for best practice. Because if you can't do everything, it's definitely an issue for best practice. But is it required for compliance, either for property routine or equilibrium routine? And my other thought is on this equilibrium routine issue on its own. There is no method to provide the list of flashes supported by the property package. So how does the certification officer know whether the test results are right or wrong? Do I have to go and ask the developer which flash types do you support?
But there is a method on the property package that says, do you support this flash specification?
But it's
So there
not,
might not be a full list.
yeah, but unlike property where it's a full list,
Mhm.
you get a list of all the properties that are supported, so anything else is unsupported. You've got to go through every one individually to find out whether it's supported or not.
Yes, which is why we're
Yeah.
generating a list of all possible flash packages.
So that, I'd like some feedback on that.
Malcolm?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a long way and I can't recall all the things if I'm not able to ask questions in between. There's no way that we're going to force every package to deliver all possible flashes, right?
No.
So you can only test compliance on what the package is providing.
But you've got to test compliance.
So you cannot force the package to give answers on things it's not.
Harry, what these tests are trying to do is prove that the unsupported flash types are handled correctly, that it doesn't crash or generate garbage results in some way or pass back the wrong error code to say that flash type is not supported. And that's the issue.
But then you would need a specification that something which is not supported should return a specific result.
It should return an error.
It should handle the standards, the specification, the standard says it should return an error
Okay.
that is, this is not supported.
Okay.
And that is what this test would do. It will prove which ones are supported and which ones are unsupported.
But just slightly more background information there. For the property routine testing, we have a list of properties that are supported. And if your package says volume is supported, then we expect at least one condition to be specified at which volume actually evaluates. Otherwise, we can't test that it's supported. And if we don't get that, we tell the user, can you add a condition to the testing table at which volume can be calculated?
Let me just finish off because I've nearly finished the entire presentation and we'll come back to this discussion. So, how much effort will be required for certification, which is a question the management board have asked me. Certification is only open to CO-Lan members, which puts a limit on the number of times certification will be required because we've got a limited number of members. But non-members, if they want certification, they can join CO-Lan and pay their fee. And so it's only it's an arbitrary limit at this moment in time, and it could increase. And it will depend on what is compliance and how automated checking is of compliance. If we can automate it all, it's not going to take any manual time at all. But I'm not sure we can automate it all. There's an awful lot of stuff I've just been describing, which is not automatable at this moment in time anyway. So how long's a piece of string is my answer to my own question. I don't know, which is why certification plans for 2024 and 25. We're not going to do anything on 2024 because we don't have a production test suite. But in 2025, the plan is to trial the process on certification on one or more property packages. At which point we will start to get a better handle on how long certification takes for each PMC, PME. We'll get this information over time. So that's the plan for next year, is actually to start trialing this process once we have a production test suite that we can use to support it. Okay, very quickly, how to contribute. If anybody out there is interested in reviewing the beta version of the PMC test suite for property packages, you can do that now. We have a beta, let me know, beyond the people who already know that they're reviewing. Sometime late in 2025, we'll get a PMC test suite for unit operations. And again, we will want reviewers for that, which may be a different community of people who need to review that, because that typically developers of unit operations will need to be involved in that. PME test suite, we've got the ultra minimal POC coming by the end of the year, fingers crossed. which case we'll want reviewers to have a look at that. Maybe we just do it via web sessions. We don't actually give people the POC. We demonstrate it and we let them see it and so on, but we're going to need people to help us with that. And again, release version end of 2025, multiple question marks. We're going to need reviewers. Or come and join the interoperability SIG and help with this whole process. Because the interoperability SIG basically consists of myself and Kyle at the moment. So, end of presentation. I hope everybody's still awake after that little lot. Questions on anything? Discussion on what is compliance. How long have we got, Kyle?
We've got about 10-15 minutes.
Okay.
So I know there is a question that I saw that you wrote into the chat as well. So I think 2 from the Teams call. I think let's take those 2 and then we'll open it up to the room. So we'll start with Harry, maybe.
Oh, I thought SB was first.
What's the Sergey? Okay, yes, I see that. Let's start with is it Sergey?
I did ask the Thermo SIG to take a back seat if it's going to be a question, a discussion on compliance.
Hi, Malcolm.
Hello.
I was a little bit surprised as you said that option 2 seems more complicated for implementation than option 1, because actually, to be honest, that was our intention to minimize user input for configuration of tests, and the idea was to allow for full automation. Whereas option 1 presumes some kind of agreement between the certification site and the vendor, which tests have to be performed and what is sufficient or not for certification. As I said, our idea was to make it as automatic as possible, and well, it might result in some extra work. I mean, in sense of certification run, but a bit more information is, in this sense, advantages, in my opinion. So that is my question.
Point taken. Yeah, point taken. When I said complexity, I was referring to complexity of implementation of the test suite. Not, and I fully agree with you that if we implement that complexity, it becomes easier for the user of the test suite. Because as you say, if
not only for the user, but also for the developers, because in a certain sense, because any configuration requires some means for that, some user input interface, whatever else. And in my opinion, it might be even more difficult to provide this means for configuration, for selection of subsets of tests that should be done, and so on and so on. And how to agree on the minimal requirement, it might be also extremely difficult. What is important for that or for that component?
yes, by user, I was including developers using the test suite. So yes, I totally agree that the option 2 will be simpler for the user stroke developer to make use of the test suite. But it is much more complex for implementing.
Okay.
And it's going to take time. It's going to take time to implement and test and review. And that's where my thought was coming from, was in the implementation and the maintainability of the test suite, because it's going to be fairly complex. Because when we started this process, I, as a past developer, 30 years past, thought once we got the test specification that the implementation was going to be very simple. You just went straight through the test specification, implemented it, it was done within minutes. But it's actually a significant chunk. The way the tests have needed to be written to fulfill option 2 in this case means there is significant coding effort in implementing the tests, which takes time, and review takes time, and it will be more difficult to maintain in the future. But if it is deemed to be required, then it can be done.
Okay,
But
thank you.
It was going around the room and just checking whether people thought it was required or whether there was any challenge to that level of detail in the testing.
Well, I'm with Sergey. It's
Yeah, I know you are. Because I have to say, I did push back on this to the thermosig and got the answer, no, this is the way it needs to be done. But I just wanted to throw it out to a wider audience.
And I think, Harry, is your question along the same lines, or is it something slightly different?
It's a comment and a question. First, I would like to comment on the last. Well, we participated in testing last time when the test suite became available, and it was immediately apparent that we had well, things missing or failing, and that was useful. So I think the whole process, even though painful, it is worthwhile, and I think yeah, something to reiterate that this is not wasted money. And secondly, I think it is useful to test dependencies and lack of flashes. But I do want to point out that there's a lot of things that are very obscure. They're only needed for very few applications, and hence it may be useful to prioritize testing. I do not know whether that was already part of your plan, and that you make some priority in what is tested and what is not tested, or what is secondary, because then you can you know, go a little bit faster with the whole rolling out, maybe, because now you take the effort to do it very thorough, but that means delays, and it could be that you can test maybe only 80% of what needs to be there, and that is 99% of the users would be sufficient. You get my point?
Yeah, I absolutely get your point there, Harry. And that is effectively what we've done with the beta we rolled out last week. We missed out the inner loop on the equilibrium routine. We haven't got the basis conversions in the material object. Something else not done, checking of values returned by the reordered compounds in properties is not done. So we've effectively done that with the beta. My challenge to that approach long term is that if you implement 80% of the functionality and it gives you, it's correct for 99%, means we're going to, we could, if we use it for certification, we could end up certifying the 1% that is not actually correct because we haven't tested it. And is that a risk we're willing to take?
Yeah, but this is something that you can discuss in the management. I think faster beta testing, because the cycle is very slow.
But you can nevertheless roll out the test suite without starting certification.
Yeah, absolutely. I was about
Yes.
to say exactly that. We could, as we're rolling out the test suite, we continue to roll out betas, and we can roll it out to the entire community, that we say doesn't have this functionality. We therefore can't use it for certification.
Yes.
But you can use it for testing your software.
Yes.
Does that meet 80% of the requirements? Is the certification just the icing on the cake on top of the actual developer's ability to test their implementations without having to write their own tests?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was having
I think it is
discussion
worth
over
it.
lunch where I think that was required.
No, I think personally, I think it is worth it, and I think it would be worth it if you also add to it that you display values that are, and that you allow the ability to provide input and display values. Because if you do that, it will have the whole test sheet also becomes creates value for all the developers.
In preparing this presentation, what I suddenly realized is nowhere in the results file do we list the properties that have been reported as supported and tested okay.
No, but
We say that it doesn't
this is a
fail.
list of things to do.
We need to at least list the properties that we've determined are supported and the flash types that we've determined are supported. And as you say, Harry, you could then go on and start reporting values so that developers can start using it to check that the values, only a developer can use it because they're the only people who know what the values are meant to be. But a developer could then, if there was a switch, the value switch on all the values for every flash you did, you could start to compare that. The developer could start to compare that themselves, which has significant value.
Yeah, it is value on two sides. It is value on the developer side, but also on the end user side. For example, Shell can then supply a certain number of tests where they supply the inputs and where they look at the outputs. And then they can determine, okay, there's between two versions of software X, I'm not naming names, they see that the value changed. Now, that may in itself not be an error. It may be fully acceptable, but at least it helps them to check different versions of the same software that are being brought out. And then you can use the test suits for something really different, but it adds a lot of value to the community.
It's regression testing.
Yes.
You can easily, that's much more easy to write, and you can do that yourself if you have access to the package.
Okay. I was going to park you there. Oh, we got another one.
Question from David.
David?
Okay, Malcolm, firstly, thank you for the presentation and the update on where things are and your demo. Thank you for the beta that you sent, as you say, on Thursday. It was a bit late to be able to do any looking at and feedback for today. But just going back to your PMC section of the presentation and your cheat sheet, you had 3 entries there: property package, property with some extra words, and unit operations. You quickly skated over unit operations, and then later in the presentation it seemed to say that is still to come. Am I interpreting that all correctly?
You are interpreting that correctly. The unit operation library only contains 1 test currently, just so that we had it in there. It is not functional effectively for you for testing any unit operation. That will come next year.
It will check
Yep.
that it has a.
Okay.
So
Thanks
yeah,
for the
your
clarification.
interpretation is exactly correct.
Okay.
I have 2 questions still about the certification.
And can I just check it? Has anybody else got any questions or discussion you want to add to it before Jasper? Okay, go ahead, Jasper.
So you said if there's an information item that says no pressure dependent properties are supported, we need to check that with the developer. I don't understand that because the software tells you it's not supported. Why do you need to ask the developer? The developer surely has read the report.
I know the answer.
Okay.
That was definitely a point I would also like to raise, and let's say bring back the question to the audience. So you had the issue that you say, okay, is this relevant or not for certification? And I think we discussed it in the very beginning that what means compliance. So being compliant to the specification is a necessary requirement, but it's not everything, let's say. So the other part of compliance is, what do I promise?
Usability, that is something we definitely need to add.
I, as a developer of my thermal package, needs to define whether I would like to or I'm able to deliver these pressure-dependent properties or not. So I need to define this beforehand, before I run the test, I think. Not put the task to the compliance officer from my point of view.
But it is neither.
If I define it should be there, then it should follow the CAPE-OPEN specification and say, giving the right answer, okay, I'm not able to provide pressure-dependent properties. If I specify beforehand there should be pressure-dependent properties, and the test suite finds out, no, there are no pressure-dependent properties, then this is failure, and then I'm not compliant. And I think we need to.
I think it's taking the responsibility 1 level too far. The test suite checks whether the various information functions and what is supported and is not are consistent with the actual calculations. So if the pressure dependent property is consistent with, get me the list of properties that is supported, and the package consistently says I do not support pressure dependent properties, which is, by the way, all of them. I will take the package on its word, and if the end user or the client wants to know what is supported by this package, all we need to do is print in the test report the properties that are supported and make that report public. And the software vendor that is going for compliance can read that test report before submitting it to check whether it is correct. That is not a CAPE-OPEN, that is not a CO-Lan responsibility.
No, it's not CO-Lan's responsibility.
It is if you're saying it's compliant. But the problem at the moment is that I was reading that report file, doing certification for CO-Lan. I've got no idea. The software may have checked, but I've got no information beyond that info message. It doesn't tell me what properties are supported and if any of them are pressure dependent. So doing the certification, I can't compare that info message with what's been told about the properties that are supported, because I don't have a list of properties supported in the results file.
Well, that is on my list today.
I think we definitely need to do that, and that may make that issue go away. So you don't need to ask me.
But if the list is empty, you will get an info message that the list is empty, and your list of supported properties will be reported as an empty list.
Which is then fine.
So
which
that
is
gives
then
you
fine.
enough information.
Yes. Yeah. At the moment, with the results file done as it's currently done, I don't have enough information.
The other issue that I had is, can you go back to the slide that lists the results of somebody challenging a test outcome?
I'll have to share it.
Was it before me? Yes, it was. Yes. Oh, where's Teams gone? I need to share it. That one. I won't bother to bring it up. That one.
Okay, I missed the first one. The first possible outcome is simply the user is wrong and the test is correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yes. Yeah, it is there. Okay.
There's no other questions?
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Welcome.